just give everyone a minute to settle down. Good afternoon and a warm welcome, everybody, to our session on ERP strategies for ERP project success, essential strategies for ERP project success. My name is Kumar Malampalli. I'm a partner and co-founder at RheinBrücke IT Consulting. We provide ERP solutions and services to companies across the globe. I have, over the last 3 decades, managed complex programs and projects spanning various continents in the world and multiple countries, sometimes with annual budgets greater than $50 million. ERP systems are extremely complex, right? We have a lot of challenges when we are dealing with ERP systems. There can be huge budgets. There needs to be a lot of commitment from the organization, a lot of commitment from various stakeholders within the organization. Some projects can take years to complete, especially for large companies. They can also cost very significant amounts of money. A ERP project can be catastrophic if it fails, because it can be a very costly mistake for the company. There are companies that have wasted millions of dollars in implementing ERP systems that eventually did not work as expected by their stakeholders. According to Gartner, 50 to 75% of ERP projects fail in some way or the other. 20 to 25 projects fail to deliver because they are delayed, or they are over budget, or they fail to meet expected benefits, and some even get abandoned. A further 50% projects are viewed to have missed some or other form of the KRA or KPIs that they have been initially planned to achieve. It's a very complex topic. There are some very famous examples like Hershey's and Nike, where hundreds of millions of dollars were spent and the projects were a huge failure. One common feature across all of this is, of course, project management. Right? Project management plays a very, very crucial role in helping a project meet its desired goals. And that makes the topic for the day extremely relevant, extremely important for all of us. And I'm really looking forward to this session with a fantastic panel of experts that we have with us today. It gives me great pleasure to introduce to you our panel of experts who have between them over half a decade, half a century of ERP project experience between them. It's a fantastic session that I'm looking forward to. First and foremost, I'd like to welcome Leonard Wertzky. Leonard is, apologies for that. Leonard comes with global expertise in ERP project management, has implemented several large global programs, and he has directed ERP programs in companies like FL Smith and Avanade to streamline sales, wholesale, production, finance functions across multiple countries in 4 continents. Thank you, Leonard, and a big welcome to you. Our next speaker for the day is Princey Verghese. Princey is an accomplished program manager with over 15 years of experience in all phases of retail technology, business operations, and she holds a track record for spearheading transformation programs. She's currently leading a large digital program for Starbucks across the MENA region, and is also heading crucial projects in the hospitality division of Alshaya Groups, one of the world's largest brand franchises, especially across the MENA region. She's an experienced change agent, and she's passionate about leading technology turnarounds in situations where, with a proven ability to align IT with operational goals and strategic objectives. Warm welcome, Princey, once again, looking forward to our conversation. And last but not least, I'd like to introduce my colleague, Rashid Pandor. Rashid is an experienced project program manager who comes with a demonstrated history of leading large ERP projects across the globe. He's got over 2 decades of experience working in Epicor Corporation, where he was involved in very large global programs, and then further 5 years at RheinBrücke, managing end-to-end delivery for multiple accounts in EPC, manufacturing, retail, and CPG. Rashid, welcome, and hi once again. So this leads us to the actual conversation for the day. And good afternoon, panel, and looking forward to this conversation. I'll start first at the very beginning, right? A job well begun, they say, is a job half done. So Rashid, project planning is a very, very crucial step to ensure that ERP projects get executed on the basis of a very strong foundation. I remember for a large program that I was doing at a very, very, very large automotive company, the planning phase itself ran for months together. And can you just tell us a bit about your experience in the importance and especially some key tips on how to take project and program planning forward?
Well, in this day and age, I think it's very important that we consider we work in a globally fluid environment. So we're working across a global environment where projects can be based anywhere in the world. So the first thing I usually take into consideration when I am planning a project is to look at the geographical location and time zone. The next thing I'm always doing is taking into consideration things like public holidays that the client team may have, as well as my own team's holidays. It can get very, very complex when you're managing a project which is spreading across multiple countries, or where you have resources who are placed in different parts of the world. So it's very important to take into consideration things like the customer's business peak times, such as month-end closing, any other key business activities or events that they may have, and consider all of these as the blackout dates before you even start to try and put your planning together. Once that's done, another very important part, whilst you're project planning, it always revolves around key activities and their associated work breakdown structure. The one thing I've learned over the years is that you should also buffer accordingly for all those unplanned meetings and communication hours that are required by the project team. So I think we all know we get into projects where we have got the best of plans in place. And one of the things we generally don't think about is, let's say, the small conversations we may have here and there, maybe a 5-minute conversation, which can also lead to a 2 or 3 hour conversation, followed by numerous email communications back and forth. So I always buffer into my plans time that allows for that to happen. And that will also have an impact on the overall project plan. Last but not least, run the plan by your team and the client multiple times and allow for revisions. Make sure everyone understands the plan, everyone understands their touch points. Ensure that they understand the slippages on the project will equal cost. A lot of the times, or in some experience where I'm working with new project resources, they may not necessarily understand that if they run late of an activity, that's going to have an implication on the timescale of the project or the cost. And sometimes they even see it as a project management activity. So we need everyone to buy into the plan, not least our own team, and get them on board. So getting early buy-in to the plan is extremely important, but allowing enough time to communicate, make the revisions also is key to ensuring you have a successful plan.
Absolutely, Rashid. In fact, I remember when I was working in a project in an airline. In Europe, we used to never plan workshops or go lives around football matches because half the people would not be coming in on those days. So very, very important. Small things can make a huge difference in the planning phase.
Absolutely.
Next, coming to Princey, stakeholder management again is a very, very sensitive and important topic, right? You could have the perfect plan in the world, but if your stakeholders are not aligned or signed up to that plan, you could end up getting nowhere, right? So how do you ensure proper alignment with your stakeholders? How do you ensure you have their buy-in, not just at the beginning, but as things get difficult or the project gets complicated, you continue to retain their buy-in?
Thank you, Kumar. So let me start by stating who is a stakeholder, right? So anybody, any group, or any organization who can actually positively or negatively impact your project, impacted by the project, or perceived to be impacted by your project can be considered as a stakeholder. Then you might end up with the question, okay, does it mean that everybody under the sky is going to be your stakeholder? Absolutely not. So right at the beginning of the project, one of the things that I do along with my teams who are going to lead the project is sit down and try to identify who these key people are going to be. We might not be absolutely clear right in the beginning, but even if we are doubtful about few of the people, it's better to include them and do a categorization on the basis of their interest for the project versus how much they can influence the project. That will help us to actually identify a strategy, how do we manage them, and that can be executed throughout the project. There are certain elements that we need to consider, especially as Rashid mentioned. In huge implementations like ERP implementations, we touch base on different business units within the organization. We work along with the teams across different regions and different culture, different time zones. It's absolutely necessary that we understand the stakeholders, identify them, their nature, the way how they respond, so that we can manage them accordingly throughout the course of the project. For me, the key benefits of identifying the key stakeholders and engaging them and involving them throughout the course of the project are, first, we get the commitment from the top leadership. So definitely your top leadership will be definitely under your stakeholder list who can influence or help you to drive your projects to the right direction. And also to ensure that all the key stakeholders from all the relevant domains have been included in the beginning business requirement sessions for the project will definitely help us to identify all requirements, which can possibly avoid any kind of scope creep down the line. It is absolutely necessary that we communicate, involve, and engage them throughout the project, mainly because of a change management perspective as well. Throughout the course of the journey, it is easier if more people are engaged, more people are involved in the course of the journey. On the flip side, as you can imagine, if they are not there, requirements are missed, timelines are not being achieved, you don't have the right level of support, and as you said, the project fails, and that is one of the reasons for the statistics that we see in the current world.
Absolutely, absolutely spot on. In fact, two very, very closely related topics, right? It's kind of logically leading me to another topic you mentioned, right? Change management. However, before we get there, Leonard, I thought we'll talk about something which again needs to be addressed right at the beginning, and as we go along, of course, it keeps coming back, which is data, right? Data, especially historic data, legacy data, data management, data migration is again a very important thing that needs to be addressed from day one, or maybe even before day one. In fact, I've been in a situation in a very, very large engagement where the data migration was 2 times longer than the actual project itself. So Leonard, can you just tell us a little bit about what are the key things that should be factored in when we are looking at data management and migration?
Sure, Kumar. First of all, Kumar RheinBrücke, thank you for having me and give me the opportunity to share some of my experiences. Yeah, as you said, data management is very important and it needs to be part of your plan from day one. And it should not only be in your plan, it should a day one priority also. Because you can have excellent stakeholder management, you can excellent communication and business processes, but if the data what you put in is of poor quality, you will have a poor project and a very poor outcome where you as a product manager are not benefiting from, and especially you're hurting the company. So day one priority is very important. And what I advise based on experience is make it a sub-project within your main project. Yeah. Appoint a dedicated project manager for data management who is following up on all the needed and nitty-gritty what needs to be organized around data. Also, the legacy program and data is probably not fully aligned with the data what is needed for your new program. So cleaning up, make sure you have the right data, your customer data is correct, your purchase order are tip-top, that can start basically from, if there is a rumor of a project, you can already start it. I always say also, cleaning up the data, even if you don't do the project, you will benefit from it anyway. So having said that, people appointed for data migration is most of the time someone who is normally working with the data. And working with data is probably something else than extracting it, understanding the data just on a flat line, and understanding what it means if it's not integrated in your program. So you and your product team and hopefully your data migration team need to explain what you want, what the data is, what you want to receive, and also work with them together. A good example, what I see everywhere, is if you ask someone, what is an open purchase order? If you ask it at eight persons, you will get 10 different answers, because it's very difficult to find out, okay, what is a open purchase order in their old legacy system, in the new system. So work with them, talk to them, and try to get everything on the table. And lastly, from the beginning, you need to make sure that they understand that data delivery, data extract and delivery to you so you can upload it to the new system is not something you only do once. You do it multiple times, and you do continuous improvement on it until you do your final testing and your data is perfect. So make sure they understand extracting, transforming, and delivering data is a repeatable process. It's not something you do only once. They need to include that in their process, that they can repeat it 3, 4, 5 times. That's on high level some of my experience on data management and data migration.
Absolutely, I think very, very important points, Leonard, and I don't see, that any one of them can be ignored. However big or small a project is, first time load, incremental load, quality of data, even the ERP project is delayed, please start cleaning the data. Fantastic points. Thank you so much. One request to the audience, please use the questions option to ask us questions. We'll be, if time permits, towards the end, we will also take up audience questions. So there'll be a questions option there. Just click on that and type in your questions. Thank you so much. Princey, I come to the other important topic that you touched upon earlier. When you were talking about stakeholders, you also were mentioning change management. Change is inevitable, right? Nothing is static in life, and at the same time, it's human nature to resist change. We need to get out of our comfort zones, and it always makes people a little, resistant to cooperating when there is a change that is happening. And ERP projects actually change a lot of things in any organization. They streamline processes, sometimes they redesign processes if needed. There's a lot that happens. So can you just talk a little bit about how it is that we can help people adapt to change, and that way make the project a little more smoother?
Sure, Kumar. So change management is one of the misunderstood topic under project management, or underrated topic, I would always say. One of the questions that we always ask the top leadership team about what do you think, how your organization is ready for the change? The response that we get right in the beginning is, oh, we are very excited. The people are very excited about this change. They are all fed up with the old system. They want to move away from that. That statement actually underrates an underlying fact that huge implementations, like any transformation programs or ERP implementations, touches different part of your business units within the organization, and that brings in quite a lot of complexity along with it. Knowingly or unknowingly, change will be introduced, and that causes an unconsciousness resistance throughout the journey, and hence this topic of change management becomes absolutely necessary. One of the key things that we do in such critical projects is assessing the readiness of the organization for the change, and that can be technology agnostic, right? We don't have to actually wait for the technology to be selected to do that. you can already see your organizational structure, what's the culture within the organization, what are the pain points that actually we want to solve this project, and how much the organization is ready for this change, they are in need for this change. That needs to be ideally done during the demand phase or even before the demand phase itself of the project. So that's absolutely a necessary that usually gets missed out. Secondly, from my experience, one of the key points that we need to ensure, we as project managers or program team needs to ensure is there is absolute alignment between the corporate strategy and the project strategy. Most of the cases that we have seen is corporate strategies have been published, but your project, even if you know these ERP solutions can bring in a lot of value, increase productivity, increase automations, reduce the effort required from specific teams, if these benefits are not aligned with the returns of investment or the plan or the strategy of the corporate, at any point in time of your project execution, the dynamics can change. And hence, it's absolutely necessary that we consider that element as well. Then two key elements that we always need to look at throughout the course of the project is process and people. And Leonard have actually touched base on the process side. Business process management is absolutely key. Some of the organizations or some of the business units that I have worked with, they do their day-to-day operations, but they absolutely have no clue about what's the current process. If you go and ask people, they will point out to different people within the organization. So understanding your ASIS process, what's currently happening, is there any process, or do they know what they're doing, is absolutely necessary, and that can be done right in the beginning of the project. And a clear vision about the to-be process that you want to implement, right? Because as a part of the technology solutions, there are industry standard processes defined, and hence we know that where we want to go. That gap analysis is required. At the same time, people, organizational design is absolutely necessary during the course of the project to ensure that your technology is fantastic. We have selected tier 1 solutions. We know XYZ benefits that you get, automation of your financials, invoice management, but what we might miss is to see what exactly this automation, or how exactly these automation is going to impact the people who were doing these activities manually before. Did you define their roles and responsibilities? Did you explain to them how your roles are going to change, how your reporting line is going to change, how your performance is going to change? So if that is not being done, even if you bring in fantastic technology into the industry, into the field, people will get lost, and they will revert back to the place where they were. Communication and training, I take that as a given. People knows how to communicate them, and training is just an academic process. So if you understand the impact of the change, if you ensure processes are defined, if you ensure organization structure is being defined, people knows their roles and responsibilities, training is just an academic process that we need to finish. So these are the elements that I usually ensure as a part of the change management stream, and we do have dedicated resources in all the projects, and we should. It's not an optional element, it's a mandatory element going forward that we need to consider.
Absolutely, you bring in some very key points there. Thanks, Princey. A couple of things I just wanted to put a pin on. Rashid, Princey was talking about business process management, and maybe if we have time, you can talk a little bit about SIPOC towards the end and say, how we address this particular aspect upfront through a structured process. It would be something interesting probably that people would like to know, because I think people don't realize seeing a process in front of their eyes is quite different from doing something that you've been verbally asked to do. It's very interesting. Leonard, Princey mentioned another point, very important, right? She talked about communication. And I think it's a very integral to not just change management, to the overall success of the project, because of its implications on keeping everybody together, everybody knowing what they're doing, and so on and so forth. So if you could just talk a little bit about communication management and what are some best practices, that would be fantastic.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's very important, of course, communication, because communication keeps everything together. Everything is dependent on good communication, because otherwise you will not get anywhere. So a communication strategy is important, of course, and but you should, if you do a global program, you should see this as a starting point, because, and I think Rashid also mentioned it, you need to embrace, when you start a global program, cultural differences. Also, you need to read the company where you're in, because if you need to communicate, in some countries, it's normal that, yeah, if you come in, they don't listen to you. They only listen to their direct report, or they only listen to someone who is the natural leader within a company. So you need to read this, and you need to see this out and basically adapt this or add this to your strategy for that specific country or region where you roll your solution out. We also need, as project managers, and also as maybe the steering committee, you need to be aware that we speak a different language. We come in with a ton of abbreviations, words they have maybe heard, but they have never worked with it. So they don't really know what it is. And we really should be aware of that even though for us it's very normal and we really know what it means, it could be something they have no clue what you talk about. So pulling that up, we speak a different language. I always tell my team, and also to the project manager of the client, of our in-house project manager, if something needs to be communicated, keep it simple. Don't put, for instance, a slide up with 5 things you want to tell. Keep it simple, because if you tell 5 things, they will maybe remember none of it, because it's too much, too overwhelming. And also I say, use Mickey Mouse language. That is basically the top level of keep it simple. Oh yeah, the natural leader. You could be surprised what you find, who is basically the real one they listen to in the company. It might be not even a manager, but just the one who works the longest there, and everyone trusts him. He knows what to do. And lastly, I think it's very important that also understand that it comes with you. We talk a different language, but also even if it's their language you talk about, and it's normal in communication, do not assume that your audience, the people you want to communicate something to, will get the message the first time. I said, if it's something you really want to bring over, repeat, repeat, and repeat. They use it in commercials, they use it in advertisement. Basically, if you want to sell something to the company, you need to have the same strategy for this. Repeat it over and over again, and then hopefully they will remember and they will act with. And yeah, that's basically my, oh, there's one more thing. I think be open and be honest in your communication. Don't hide things, be very honest, and add a little bit of humor to it, because humor is very important to bind people together. That works everywhere around the globe. That's basically my my take on the communication.
Absolutely. No, key points, right? Understand the culture, keep it simple, don't use jargon, keep it simple and humorous. Fantastic points. I think it would work anywhere. It just shows, that you've been there and done that. Thank you. Rashid, this, kind of naturally leads to the one single super sensitive topic that many times leads to overruns, delays, even sometimes failures of projects. And we cannot have a conversation about project management without talking about scope. Scope is the one thing that can make or break things in a project. So I think we'll probably spend a few minutes here, and if you could just share some of the best practices in how to manage scope more effectively, and we may even circle back to the others on this topic. Yeah.
Well, Kumar, as you very rightly put it, it can be a very sensitive topic, especially in a project environment. It can be a very lengthy one too, but I'm going to give a few examples based on my experience. Let's try and summarize this a little bit. So first of all, for me, scope creep, no matter how small, no matter how big it is, no matter how simple it may be, no matter how complex it is, we have to understand that it will always impact the time and cost of a project. And this is where the challenge is. Explaining this to a client at times can be a real challenge. Sometimes they can see something which they believe is a very small change to a process or a very small, let's say, development, but ultimately they don't understand the true impact of what it will take to get that done. Just talking about it, first of all, documenting it, all of these elements take time and they have an impact on the time and cost of a project. So it's really important from my perspective that when we are first engaging with a prospect or a client and we're still at the contractual stage, that we clearly discuss this point. We get the customer to very clearly understand that anything and everything that we are agreeing, which is part of the scope at the point of contract sign off, is very much fixed. We're agreeing a scope with them at that time. We're giving them a budget, a timeline for a project at that specific point in time. And what we must be very clear on and very transparent on is the fact that, if and where we find issues with or scope, there will be an impact later on. So getting the customer to understand that as early as possible in the process, and I would say it has to be at the contractual stage, will help to smooth the path later on. It will reduce down on the surprises that we find. The next point, which has come, and I've seen it impact my own projects at times, is to ensure that your project team have a very clear understanding of that project scope. I've many times been in a very difficult situation with a customer where we are discussing scope because the project team failed to identify the change. And then only later on, we've come to understand that maybe there was additional development effort involved, or maybe we consumed more hours on the project because of this change, just from discussing meetings, documenting a change, whereas it was never agreed that this change was going to be part of the project. So getting the team, your own internal team, aligned and getting them to also understand the change management process is extremely important, especially when you're dealing with new resources or junior resources in a project who are not so familiar with this. They can be sometimes in front of a very demanding customer, and their inability to basically identify a change, or their inability to say no, can impact us later on when we start to have difficult conversations over budget or time or delay, etc. However, even after you've done all of this, for sure, even after you've got an agreement at a contractual stage that the customer clearly understands the change management process, your team are aligned, even the project team from the customer side are aligned in terms of scope management, it's inevitable that you may still end up with some scope creep on a project. So my way of handling this is, as soon as it is identified, as soon as you identify in a project that a change has appeared, it's necessary to label the change and to ensure that we label it as a change. So everyone who we're talking to, be it the customer, within our own internal project team, and so forth, clearly understands that we are dealing with a change. It's about creating a mindset that everyone understands that we've labeled this issue or this event or this item as a change, so that we start to then pave the way for a sensible discussion, that there's no surprises as we're discussing this later on that, we've now identified it as a change. No, it's something we label from the minute we understand it. And this just has allowed in the past, and I've seen this on my projects, that the minute we do that, we're building this this mindset, this culture, in the sense that people understand that, hey, there is a change here, we're going to have to deal with this, we're going to have to talk about it, and ultimately we deal with it in a sensible way within the realms of the change management and scope management process.
Absolutely. I think you've touched some very sensitive points, Rashid, and it probably needs a little bit further digging, right? Princey, there are several things we talked about. We talked about planning, we talked about stakeholder management, we talked about scope management, communication management, data. They're all very interrelated. That one thing can impact the other. So can you just try and connect the dots? I'm very sure everybody in the audience is also trying to see what is the common thread that connects everything.
And the common thread, I would say, Kumar, it's project management, right? And that's one of the reasons why I love what I do. If you look at everything that you have mentioned, absolutely necessary throughout the course of the project. Just to continue on what Rashid mentioned about the scope itself, just that one topic. When we start the project, everybody will be initiated with the concept that we will go with a vanilla product. We will just go with the industry standards. However, the moment you get into the solution, you understand the capabilities of the solution. And it relates to what I just mentioned about change management as well. If you don't come with the right mindset, if we are not communicated to them properly, what we will end up is that resistance to change from the way how they work, and we end up making the new solution that we are bringing in exactly a replica of where we are. We were with the old system, a lot of integrations that we haven't planned, changing customization within the solution that we have brought in. So these can impact, and hence absolutely necessary to make it clear to the organization what we are going to achieve. We will stick on to the industrial standards, and the change management will manage the part of moving people from where they are to the new place. If you look at the different topics that we have just mentioned, for me it's a piece in the jigsaw. Everything has to fit into the right place for us to ensure that the project is landing in the right way. Absolutely necessary that we do the proper planning in the way how it should be right in the beginning, to ensure that you have your budget, your timelines, your activities, your regions, the holidays, the resource availability, to ensure that a proper planning is being done. You identify your stakeholders, absolute must. Without them, you're not going to deliver your project. Scope management we touched upon, understanding what we are going to deliver and ensuring that we only deliver that, not more, not less, is absolutely necessary throughout the project. Constant communication, constant change management to ensure that we move to where we want is absolutely necessary. So we can keep on talking about this topic, connecting every dots, but all the 10 knowledge areas that we always mention about project management, they equally carry weightage, and we need to ensure that everything is being balanced in the right way by the project manager.
Absolutely. Unfortunately, we do not have time to cover every single thing in depth. Leonard, just one quick point. There's a follow-up question from Mr. Abdul Latif. He wants you to clarify, the actual process, extraction, transformation, and load. He just wants you to just explain it a little better. So before I go to the next question, I thought we can just quickly catch up on that here.
Sure, no problem. On the high level, it's already mentioned, of course, extract, transform, and load for data. Yeah, you have your legacy systems, or maybe they do not have a system and they want to have it in the system. All this stuff is basically extracting the data, collecting your data, and put it together in a structured way. You as a project team need to provide them templates where this data needs to go into, because that's the first transformation you do. You transform it in the format your new system needs to have it. On top of this, you have your raw data, what you already work with. Then your project team needs to advise what needs to happen with this data, because maybe the data comes, example, the address comes in just one big block of text, but your program wants to split it up. Then you need to split it up in address, number, postal codes or zip codes, and all the kind of stuff. Then you need to guide your team. Okay, this needs to be transformed. You need to put it in different way. So once all this transformation of the data is done and kept and put in the right format, then they can deliver it to you, because you as a project team should basically not touch the data anymore. You just theoretically should press a button, upload it to the system, because in my opinion, your customer owns the data. If you transform it, you might end up in problems because you're touching their data And the data is a big asset for them. So they need to own it, they need to transform it, and they need to deliver it so that you can load it with just a press of a button. Does that explain a little bit, or a little bit more texture?
And I think it's absolutely perfect, a very, very crisp and the perfect answer. Thank you. Yes, and Mr. Abdul Latif has said that thank you, it's good. So this brings me to one specific topic, Leonard, where you have personally been involved. I've seen you in that capacity multiple times in the past. Large global programs, right? Programs which span countries, time zones, continents. They have a life of their own. They are not like a single project where everybody's co-located. You can manage the dynamics better, right? If you have a large program, it has a life of its own. So can you just talk a little bit about how they're different and what you should keep in mind when you're doing something like that?
Yeah, sure. Having worked on projects across the globe, I have some experience there, of course, but I think most of it is already touched upon. You know, Rashid mentioned take the time zones in consideration, because if you work across time zones, your effective working time with your client can be affected. You know, you maybe only have 5 hours a day. You can have meetings or you can talk to them because there is such a big gap in the time zones. So make sure you put that in your project plan, like Rashid was saying. Local holidays, local habits. For instance, I live in the United States. It's March Madness now. There is college basketball, what is due in the afternoon. Don't expect everyone is fully minded to do difficult meetings because they want to watch basketball. Cultural differences might also have an effect on deadlines, because in some cultures, they just say yes to a deadline instead of thinking about, am I able to make it? They just say yes, start work hard, and then all of a surprise, they don't meet the deadline you gave them and they never responded to you. So be aware of this cultural difference and adapt to it and keep on asking and ask for progress in the tasks they need to execute. Another thing is, and that's not on global projects, even if you do it in your own city, every company thinks they are special. They are different. And this will not work for me, although you come with a solution would work for a lot of companies. So a big advice for me is if you come to a project, even in the sales process already, make sure you attach a strong solution architect, what really understand not only the solution, that's a part of it, but also business processes. Also a solution on the architect who understand what Rashid was saying. A small change can have a big effect, or can have a butterfly effect, you know, and have a lot of extra things what you need to do. So I think if you have a strong solution architect where you work together with, you will really benefit in your project from start to finish, to keep scope and to keep things simple and to convince the company, yes, you're special, but even though you're special, you can still use standard processes within our system. Also, you need to be aware that you affect people in many ways. It's very stressful for them. You need to be, you're shaking up everything what they're doing day to day. You're adding much of responsibilities, workload to them. Be aware of this also. Many times people were crying in projects because it's just too much. Be sensible for this, and also have it in your change management. And I said it before, make sure you have fun, work with them, although you might have big arguments with your customer or where you work with. If you have some fun together, you will understand and you will adapt better to a change, or you can work better. It's always good to have some fun together. And lastly, working across the globe will enrich your life. Also enjoy that. It will make you a different person and understand life better, in my opinion.
Thank you, Leonard. I am definitely having fun today. There's so much fantastic information coming across. I'm thoroughly enjoying myself, and thanks to all of you. Rashid, this brings me to one other point, very important, right? We have a good plan, we have scope defined, we have stakeholder management. All of this is based on having a good methodology, right? A methodology that addresses all these pillars in a meaningful and structured manner, which is repeatable, reasonably error-free. Of course, the project manager is there to ensure that errors are minimized and mitigated as they come, right? So can you spend a little bit of time about the kind of methodology you have used? We also mentioned about business process mapping, so maybe a little bit about that as well. Just a few minutes talking about that. And after that, we have a lot of audience questions coming in, so we'll also talk about that.
Sure, Kumar, I will spend a few moments to talk about implementation methodology. So, I've been doing this for close to 20 years now. When I first started off, we were using a very prescriptive methodology. So what do I mean? It means we go to customer, we sit with the customer, we ask a whole series of questions. The customer gives us the answers. And at the end of the process, we feel we've got what you can consider a doctor's prescription in a sense. So you've got a list of all the answers, which basically give you an idea of the business requirements from a customer today. And this was a very typical way of doing it in the very early days when I started out 20 years ago. In this day and age, we've changed quite a lot. So within RheinBrücke, we use something called the scale implementation methodology. At the heart and at the center of our implementation methodology is a key document and process that we call SIPOC. So SIPOC, for those who don't know, is an abbreviation of supplier, input, process, output, and customer. What this enables us to do is to map every business scenario, every business process to a SIPOC. And this document is carried forward throughout the entirety of the project. So we're using this at the initial business analysis. We're using this to perform our proof of concept, our user acceptance testing. We build the key user training and end user training around the SIPOC. And ultimately, it's a document that we can refer to at any point in the project to ensure that every process is something that we can measure each of our project events across, and ultimately see that we are implementing in line with the SIPOC document throughout the entirety of the project. What we're also using today is functionality, for example, a product from Epicor Knowledge Mentor, to build our education material, to make that online, to make it very comprehensive. It can be role-based. It can be something that you can roll out to a new user just as much as an experienced business user. And again, with the use of our SIPOC within our methodology and the Epicor Knowledge Mentor tool, we're able to deliver very effective training. I know Princey mentioned, it's an academic point. I absolutely agree, it's an academic, but ensuring that we've got measurable training. So at the end of it, when customers are going live, we know that the super users or key users have valid training and that they've understood how to use the processes within a product, as well as end users, is absolutely key. The worst thing we can have is going live with end users who've really got no real understanding of how to use the product, even though they've had an academic training, let's say.
Absolutely. Thank you, Rashid. And we will now go and take some audience questions. We have just about 8 minutes left. So, and we have several questions. So maybe I'll take a few of them. And for those whom we could not cover in the time that we have, we will probably get back to you on email. The first question, this is an interesting question, especially when you are at the top end of the project, right? How do you define ROI for an ERP initiative? This is the first question that the decision makers who are sponsoring this initiative will ask. Who would like to take this question? This is, I think, a key topic.
I can start off, and definitely others can join in, Kumar. ROI, in all the scenarios that I have worked in, we, right in the beginning of the demand phase itself, we understand what's the complete cost of the project, right? The resources for the solution, how much of a costing is required for the implementation of the cost, as well as we try to understand the benefits that we try to get out of the project as well. It can be direct or indirect, it can be tangible or intangible benefits that we can get out of the solution. So definitely returns of investment is calculated on the basis of the cost of the project versus the benefits that you get out of the project. And we touched upon one of the elements as an example while we were discussing. For example, your technology is going to bring in automation of your accounts payable, or invoice management is going to be better. How much of that can be materialized or transformed into the time that you have saved from the people who were actually doing manual work? It could be 5 resources who can possibly use their time to better work rather than doing the paperwork that they had to. So cost versus benefit should give the returns of investment for your project.
Sure. Leonard, you want to add anything to that quickly?
Yeah, it's a good question, return on investment. And also, I think when a when a program runs, it's a lot of times gets forgotten because they are not focusing on it anymore. They want to control the cost because they think maybe we get some return on investment. And also, yeah, Princey mentioned a lot. It's very difficult to define what will be your benefit in implementing a new system, because it can be, like you said, tangible, intangible. You can, because your sales process is more efficient, maybe you sell more. Maybe you have a better customer service out of self, so people are getting more enthusiastic about your product and they will sell more. Efficiency, like automation, you can reduce maybe your headcount. And there is also some other stuff, because maybe you have a very old platform at the moment what needs to be replaced, and your running cost of your new software is lower than you already have, or maybe you were not even it was not even possible to run it anymore. So calculating return on investment is a huge task where you need across a lot of departments input from sales, marketing, accounting, IT, all needs to input in the benefits of a new system, and it needs to go across the whole company.
Yep, absolutely. We have very little time. I'll maybe try and cover 1 or 2 more questions. One interesting question, I don't have a name, sorry, and Fareen, this was your question. I hope you're happy with the answer. There's an anonymous attendee question which says, how technically capable should your in-house team be to execute IT project? Rashid, you want to take this? Does the team need to be technically capable, or?
I think it comes back down to what you agree contractually before you set out on the project. So, one is obviously understanding what is the business objectives, but 2 is also to understand the capabilities of the in-house team. Ultimately, we could be working with a very small customer who maybe has 1 IT manager and nobody else. So it's important to understand the landscape of resources within an organization. And try to understand the scope. So understanding the scope will allow us to understand, the level of standard fitment or standard fit that the customer is able to take on board, and also understand the level of potential customizations, report developments, etc., that need to be delivered for the customer. If we have a clear understanding on the scope, we should then be able to map out based on their own resource landscape, whether they have the capability in-house to take on certain technical elements or not, or whether we need to provide it. So I think it's something that needs to really be taken on board at the very initial stages of the project, to really understand whether the business has the capability in-house, or whether they're going to need to outsource or even hire, or whether they take on board, let's say, RheinBrücke or any other providers' capabilities and expertise.
Yeah, absolutely. I think finally, probably it also is amounts to what kind of budget is available, right? If there's budget, then the level of expertise required may be lesser. But if you're very tight on budget, you may want to do more things in-house. True that. I'll try to cover one or two more questions very quickly. One interesting question, I think, which comes up to every project manager: how do we deal with customizations? The request for customization can never end, right? So who wants to go? Leonard, you want to go take this one?
Yeah, it's very simple. No customizations. But that's always how you start in a project. No customization. You keep on saying this in the beginning, and once you go through the process, you'll discover, okay, I need to have some customizations. How you handle this? I think I mentioned it before. You need to have a strong solution architect who knows the product and knows processes. So sometimes he can come up with a different process within the system, but it's also covering the same as they think I need a change here. Because a lot of times the input you get is that this button on the screen was always red, and you tell me it's green, it's not going to happen. It needs to be red. And that is a very Mickey Mouse example, I know. But that kind of conversations you need to take with them to the extent to see if it's really, are they really different here from the standard process, or is it just that we need to work on the change management, we need to work on the adaptation of the standard process, standard solution. So it's every proposed change should be discussed and not just be accepted as a change.
Yep, I think customization is a topic for change management. And yes, if I understand you correctly, work smart, not just work hard. I think that kind of sounds it out.
Absolutely.
Yeah, sure. Here's one question, Princey, maybe you want to talk about it because you have done a lot of such initiatives. Should we go for a big bang approach, or should we do a phased implementation? What makes sense? This question is from Danya.
Kumar, I mean, there is always a big bang or a phased approach model that you can think about right in the beginning of the planning itself. What I would say is what will define your approach is basically the pressing need of your organization. There could be, and it also depends upon how quickly you want it. What are the pain points that we are actually trying to address as a part of this project, and how quickly you want it? It could be regional wise. There are certain regions where our compliance requirements are coming, which might need to be addressed quickly. There are certain functionalities within the entire solution itself that could give you more return of investment if you do first. The benefit of doing a phased approach is you reduce, or at least you have the capability to mitigate your risk in a slightly better way. Not the entire organization is going to be impacted, maybe a part of the unit if in case things goes wrong. But the pain point of that would be going through the transient phase of using two different systems, legacy and the new systems throughout one or other part of the organization. Big bang approach, moving away from the whole set of legacy systems towards the new fantastic solutions that the challenges I mentioned can make a major impact if the organization is not ready and the change management has not been managed correctly, and people are ready to accept this risk. But on the flip side, you have the benefit of having the fresh data sets, the fresh processes end to end across the business units, which would work better for the organization. So organization's need and their readiness to take the change are possibly the major factors that will decide which approach that you need to go to.
I think, we have like kind of just about 30 seconds left. So Rashid, maybe very quickly, if I have to plan a cloud migration, what should I keep in mind? Maybe in 30 seconds, if we can talk, that's about all the time we have.
It depends on, for me, it really depends on the part of the world right now, but latency is extremely important, connectivity. So that's the first thing to look at. Also, different local legal legislation in terms of where your cloud server can be located. So these are key things, especially when working here in my region, which is the Middle East. There are many more, but I think those are the first few things that come to mind that you should really take into consideration.
Yep, I know. Sorry, but we don't have time to dwell into this very interesting topic because we are on the top of the hour, and we have like literally a few seconds left for me to thank you for being such a wonderful panel. It was fantastic hosting you. Very, very good discussions. We got lots of comments from people saying, can we have the recording, please? It's very interesting. So that's always a good sign. So thank you so much. Look forward to maybe catching up with you again on some other topics that we could not cover today. Thank you once again. Have a great day.
Thank you.
And audience, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. And audience, thank you so much. You were fantastic. Lots of questions. Those that we could not answer, we will get back to you on email. Thank you.